Good afternoon. DNSSEC, why we cannot afford to avoid it. It should be impossible. And so I have a typical South African bird on the screen. So why do I say that? Well, first of all, one should understand what DNS does do. It helps us prevent attacks from subverting or modifying DNS messages and sending users to the wrong and potentially malicious websites. That was proven to be very, very easy to do. One could simply, there was the great exposure where it was shown that you could put subverted information into a caching DNS within about 5 minutes or something like that. A little bit longer now, it takes a weekend, but it's still just a statistical thing. It's relatively easy to do this. And this is the primary reason, I guess, most people should be looking at DNSSEC. When playing with DNSSEC, there are two sides to the whole story. You have your signing side, and then you have your validation side. Validation, really, really simple to do. Signing, perhaps just a little bit more difficult to do. So we're going to have a quick look at these two sides. Signing zones. Well, where are we today in South Africa? So we had this plan. It was approved back in August last year. And this resulted in ZA being signed quite quickly. So ZA was signed in September last year, and the DS records put into the root. That meant that if you were talking directly to a ZA domain, which there's not very many of, then things would work perfectly. But we have to do the top level in the country first. We immediately, more or less immediately at the same time, did web.za, small. If anything broke, no one would probably notice, and everything could be quickly fixed. So yes, we got that done there. Oh, sorry, I actually see that. We did those two, and then we played with them, and it was actually in December that the DS records for ZA were put into the root. Org and net were added in February, and we had plans to do co.za in March or April. But so far, these zones that I've mentioned, apart from co.za, are relatively small. co.za with over 1 million domains, it broke. So co.za took longer and more systematically checked, etc. And co.za was added into, or had its DS records added into ZA, and that happened on Monday, a few days ago. Nothing happened here locally on Monday. The name servers, the recursive name servers only noticed this on sort of Monday night, Tuesday. But so it's been added now. Where else? Because so far we've only spoken about domains run by the central registry. Both nom.za, Byron Sordracher, I guess some people here may know who he is, and edu.za, which I manage, were signed and accept DS records. In other words, you can put DS information into them. And DS records for edu.za were recently added about a month ago into ZA. I had thought Byron was going to do the same for nom.za, but I don't think he's done it yet. But from a giving domain names to customers' point of view, basically everything that matters has been signed. To me, the two big exceptions are probably ac.za and gov.za. Those two domains still need to be properly signed, etc. If we look at other domains, not just in South Africa, but most of the older GTLDs, they're signed. We are currently also undergoing a root key rollover at the moment. Obviously, all new GTLDs by contract with ICANN, they need to be signed. They're signed at birth. So we've been running Durban, Joburg, and Cape Town for about 2 years now. They were signed at birth. And Africa was obviously signed at birth not so long ago. From a South African perspective, it's fine signing your top level within the country, but there's no point doing that unless it filters on down. So if we look at it, we first started doing DNS and DNSSEC training back in 2005 within South Africa. We were doing two sessions every year. It has paused 2 years ago, but up to about then we had some 300 odd people trained, engineers trained. And I have evidence to suggest that that training has, and in fact, done us well. The EPP system that was put into place 3 years ago, that has from day one allowed you, the registrar, to insert DS records. So even if the domain wasn't signed, that wouldn't stop or shouldn't have stopped people, the registrars of the continent or from the country, from playing around with DNS and actually going as far as putting your client's DS records for their domains into the co.za registry, etc. So that has been around for a while. I'm also told that, by the way, the DNS training should resume early next year.
Sponsored by Zach? We told you.
Lucky. And that's what he's told me. Hasn't happened yet, we're not there. Good. So I need to give you some takeaways from this. Signing zones. How do I sign a zone? Well, you could always use a registrar that offers that service. I do it for domains. But you can also install and use freely available software. And these are links, but the Open DNSSEC software is what the ZACR uses itself, or DNS uses itself at the ZACR. It does more or less everything for you. Quite sexy. It's a nice sort of bump on the wire, depending on your setup. Bind has become obviously more mature as the time has gone by. It does most things more or less, except for key management. There's a lovely piece of software called Not DNS. It's written by the Czechs, the .cz guys, CZNIC guys. And that more or less does everything. And it also includes some key management. So you can write up into their configuration system what you expect to be done, and it will follow that. It's not perfect, but it's very, very close there. Now, I've had a script that's been doing this for 5 years. So I've been signing this sort of stuff for about 5 years now, and it hasn't broken too often. If it's broken, it's because I fiddled with it. 1/5 object, additional point would be, I understand that Power DNS actually also more or less signs on the fly. I understand that its key rollovers may not be great, but if you are a hosting provider and you have thousands of domains, there's a great chance that you're already using Power DNS. And if you're using Power DNS, you can literally flick a switch, and it will do DNSSEC for you. What it won't do is it won't pick up the DS records from a signed zone and put them into the parent, but that's not too difficult. So even when you have got DNSSEC done, and I've had people who have done the DNS training course and who have then gone on to sign, their problem normally has been, well, now we've signed the zone, how do we get it into the parent? So you still need a parent, so you still need a registrar that is DNSSEC aware, knows what to do with that. The other side of DNSSEC is the resolving part. So far all we've done is we've signed stuff and we've completed the chain. The resolving side, it would be for the eyeballs of the world, and they will obviously look through a DNSSEC-aware resolver and see eventually that something is signed. Now, these stats have been taken again from the APNIC stuff. you can actually go there and click on the DNSSEC part. So the world average at the moment, according to that, is 12.5% of all resolvers will do DNSSEC validation. For Africa, it's a bit higher. Southern Africa is 38, and South Africa, when I wrote the slides, is 39. If you were to go there right now, you'll get a picture, colored picture map of the whole of the world. And if you mouse over South Africa at the moment, it says 45%. This would imply that every 100 people, 45 of them will in fact go through a recursive resolver that is DNSSEC aware. That's actually damn good. You should also remember that the Google recursive name servers, they both are DNSSEC validating as well. And a lot of ADSL people use them as a backup resolver if their own stuff doesn't work. So what this could mean is sometimes you're using a recursive resolver that's not DNSSEC aware. Maybe there's a glitch, maybe there's a problem, then suddenly you're using Google that does. So if something is wrong somewhere else in the signing, sometimes you can get to a website and sometimes you can't. And this could be why. So right now, if you were to dig at 8.8.4.4, a domain that I have signed, then what you would see with the dig command is that AD bit being set. And that means you have authenticated data. So how do we do this? How do we make a recursive resolver DNSSEC aware? If you're running bind, it's actually extremely easy. There should be one line in your options that talks about DNSSEC validation. If that DNSSEC validation is set to auto, it does everything for you. It will do the root key rollover for you. It will do everything for you. So literally, in fact, you'll probably find that it is already set. You may not realize it. If you're back into where using managed keys, which will be automatically rolled over, then this is what the new key looks like. And it's simply adding that or taking it out from the internet and putting it into your bind configuration. There's more about this if you go and look at dnssec.co.za, you will find that sort of information there. Now, when we look at 40%, 45%, that's kind of cool. Why is it so high? Well, I would love to say that's because people have gone on the training course and at least done the easy bits, the validation bits. And this was largely, according to Jeff Houston, largely initially due to Sykes putting in DNSSEC aware resolvers. And now, I was at a conference further up the coast from here in Tanzania a couple of months ago, and the internet provider there at that time wasn't doing DNSSEC, and I said that I would tease that person, and that person came to the party, and that is why CCOM is now running DNSSEC aware resolvers here. Well, I'd like to think that I was part of that credit, you know. So thank you very much for that.
One mark to another.
One mark to another. So, yeah. So, from my point of view, DNSSEC is good. It's a step in the right direction. And registrars will start signing their customers' domains. Perhaps even make that the default. And there's a cool thing along that. Because if you do that, then that allows you to do other things. I gave a talk in the SAFNOG sessions that if you do DNSSEC signing, and then you use something like Let's Encrypt to generate free SSL certificates automatically to secure web content, costs nothing, just automate it. If you do those two things, then you can also put fingerprints of the SSL certificate into the DNS in an appropriate format and end up with DANE. Costs nothing, but it means that it would help secure access to websites and for email traffic. So there's a very good probability a lot of people are going to sign stuff. But there's also, of course, the huge issue that a lot of people won't sign stuff. Now, DNSSEC kind of happened after IPv6. I honestly thought that IPv6 was going to win this race, but DNSSEC seems to be pulling ahead of IPv6 as far as adoption goes. Now, there's a little problem, or maybe it's an opportunity to tie in a customer. In South Africa, when a domain transfer is done, the transfer is basically managed by the registrant, the owner of the domain, whoever that might be. Because when the registrar, the gaining registrar, sends a transfer request through to the COSA EP, or the ZACR's EPP system, the registrant is sent a ticket, an email ticket. If he clicks on that ticket, which could happen literally seconds after the registrar has done the transfer, that domain is suddenly moved from one registrant to, one registrar to the other registrar. If that domain was DNSSEC signed, when that happens, it's literally you're standing there, you're running this domain, this zone file for a customer, and then all of a sudden you have the rug pulled from underneath you. You have no warning, potentially. But what this means is if that domain was signed by someone who does DNSSEC, and it's taken over by someone that doesn't do DNSSEC, not only is that customer effectively downgrading his service levels, he now no longer has DNSSEC, but there's a very high probability that the DS record for that domain is still in the zone file. If it's still in the zone file and the new person is not DNSSEC aware, not running DNSSEC, has got their head buried in the sand, that domain will not resolve for 45% of all eyeballs in South Africa. That's slightly scary from my point of view, that that could be allowed to happen. Yeah, that's what that slide says. So, yeah, as I said, and I've got the value 40 and it looks like it's 45% after a week. So, it can make the domain completely disappear for half the country's population. Now, until Monday, that couldn't happen. DNSSEC is now enabled for co.za and it's working. Guess what? Now it does. So if you are a small ISP and you're doing hosting and you like your customers, but they keep shopping around, perhaps you should make their security better. I don't know. No, give them DNSSEC. Maybe turn it on automatically as a policy and do TLSA and do DANE, because, hey guys, this generates more trust in the internet. We want customers that trust the internet. But then what should happen, or what needs to happen, is everyone needs to follow suit. Otherwise, you're going to find that if they do move, it won't work. And what's the obvious solution? Move back again. I didn't tell you this. Okay. So, last slide. So, what sort of salesperson are you? What sort of business are you running? Is your head buried in the sand? Thank you. Questions? Thoughts? It's over.
Yeah, George again. So we discussed about this, but I would like to put it on the record. When next month there will be a KSK rollover, and I still think that would be quite cool if we would build a tool that operators would go and just check, press the button, it will test their recursive resolvers against the new key and say, you're good to go, or your thing will break in at the end of the year? Do you think it's possible to build a very, very simple tool that people would just go and test their resolvers if things are good or not?
I guess it's an easy enough job to do. I would like to think that most South African ISPs, if not all of them, who have been playing with DNSSEC are the same people that have been on the training courses. We've been doing these training courses for over 10 years. So hopefully they've already got that idea. I also think that ICANN has been doing a pretty good job at telling everyone that there is a key rollover. But also, if you look at the way that the newer software comes out, with bind, you're just setting it by default. It's doing it. I would like to think that ICANN is making a mountain out of a molehill, and in fact, the changing of the keys, the rollover, the keys, will actually happen. Nothing will happen, and life will carry on. I'm really hoping that's what's going to happen. I may be wrong, but I am hoping that will happen. But yes, a tool could be written to do that sort of thing. I think we're a bit late for that, as the key rollover happens next month, though.
Thanks. Mark Tinker, SECOM. Yeah, Mark, other Mark.
Yes,
Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, as Mark alluded to, we had a bit of a chat in, DNS Forum in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, SECOM was in the internet there, and obviously Mark figured out that there's no DNSSEC validation, the resolvers and so forth. And he did sort of nudge me if one could be more politically agile. And yeah, I think it took all of a week or so. I'll be honest, I've been thinking about doing DNSSEC, either validation or on resources, on zones rather, for a while, but it has really been on the back burner. And it took, what, I'd say 2-3 hours just to figure all that out. And I think, we ran bind 9.9, which has all the trust anchors by default in there, so there's not much to do on all the Anycast resolvers that we run. I think the only thing that was a bit more difficult was figuring out that enabling DNSSEC validation to on versus to auto actually does either break or make it work. So that was a bit of a learning curve. But what we found was that enabling DNSSEC validation on resolvers is actually straightforward. There's nothing to it. It's actually much easier than IPv6. Getting zones signed and all of that stuff, a little bit more involved. What we got to do was we signed ccom.mu and ccomnet.com, which is both our infrastructure domain and the corporate domain. But it's a little bit more involved. We can script a lot of the work. But yeah, if you're looking to sign and manage, updates to zones for multiple zones at the same time, that's a little bit more involved. But in fairness, for the resolver side, it's pretty simple. So yeah, thanks again for the nudge. It really wasn't that hard, and why we didn't do it earlier is beyond me, but here we are, so thanks.
There's a story, a little story in that. What Mark has done and what Andrew did 2 years ago on Liquid, they run complicated systems. They run systems that span the continent, literally, are in multiple countries, and therefore their infrastructure, as Mark said, is anycasted. So it's not just going into one machine and switching it on. It's synchronizing events and all sorts of interesting things. And it took him a couple of hours, 3 hours. That's how quick it is. It's actually a shame, because turning on DNSSEC, making a DNSSEC resolver aware is really, really simple. But one should really be signing the stuff first, the zones first, and making sure that all of that works, and then coming back later and turning on the validation. We've kind of done it the wrong way around in this country. in this region. And if you get it wrong and you sign or zone wrong, you've got a 50-50 chance whether your customers will see that content again or not. But anyway.
Ben, work online. I'd like to hazard a guess as to why we've done it the wrong way around in this country. I recently got a couple of the new .africa domains, and one of the reasons I went out and got those was because up until a few days ago, ZA wasn't signed, and so I couldn't run DNSSEC on any of our COSA domains. The headache that I've had in the last few weeks trying to feed anyone a DS key for those .africa domains, because we're dealing with local registrars, has been, I mean, absurd. And I mean, this is for a, you know, an end user registrant that kind of gets this stuff and actually cares about it. I can't imagine that the user experience for the average domain registrant in the region, given the state of readiness at the registrars generally, at least the ones that I've dealt with in the last couple of weeks, it's been a poor experience, and a lot of work needs to be done getting those guys to get their houses in order.
I hear you.
It's me again. So I'm a little bit confused now. I went to see since when the resolvers have the DNSSEC enabled on by default. And bind is 9.5, and unbound has been doing it for years. You install it and it's enabled on by default. Does that mean that people actually actively disable the DNSSEC validation?
Or they don't update their software.
Really?
I'm from Egypt. It is a comment rather than a question. I would like to say that there is a testable engine for KSK rollover done by ICANN. Every DNS provider can use it in order to be ready for the KSK rollover. And also, I do request that to ask the DNS provider in your country to be updated for the latest version of, for example, bind, in order to retrieve the new key generated by ICANN. That's all.
Yeah, I'm actually scared. Maybe that 45% will drop to something like 20% when the key rollover happens. I hope not. That's everything. Oh, Machiki.
Last one. So, the question that comes to mind with respect to the question that was asked by Ben is whether there are any initiatives to get the registrars here to go through some form of training on DNSSEC for registrars. I do know there is DNSSEC for registries, but not for registrars. And if you think about it, there are some slight nuisances and differences to it. And the question is, are we supporting them to be able to actually provide this service?
If I could follow on before you say, that's actually a good point, because when we did DNSSEC a couple of weeks ago after Dar es Salaam, .mu is not signed, and CCOM is CCOM.mu, so .mu isn't signed. COM, org, net, that's all good. KE is good, ZA is good, UK is good, all that, but MU isn't. So that's actually a good point.
So how did you get CCOM.mu done?
Well, I signed it, but MU isn't.
So you signed CCOM.mu, but you can't put the DS records into MU because MU is not signed.
Right.
So unless you go and look at the DLV look-aside system, which has basically been switched off now, or almost switched off, then you've gone through a good intellectual exercise, but there's no great value at the moment.
Exactly.
That's a shame. Regarding the training, yes, I wear a DNS T-shirt. Yes, I have access to the people doing everything, but I sat down and I wrote my own EPP code. I went through the RFCs, wrote it, and designed things from scratch and found out what I could get off the internet. The DNS/DNS key parts to do that and to interact with the registry system were actually quite simple in comparison to most of the rest of the stuff. In comparison, it's not that too difficult. But anyone running COCA should be able to do it with no problems at all.
So That's why I say there's training for CCTLDs to do DNSSEC. And I think that's well done, and we also have that, I think, under ION as well. But the registrars, who will also be managing quite a huge number of zones as well, I don't think we have something for them.
There's been no explicit, if you are a COSA registrar, how do you get EPP working with DS records to put it into the parent? No. It's been available for 2 years or 3 years or something, but I doubt that anyone's doing it.
Has there been training on?
Not
you could do
explicitly
this?
so, no.
Yeah. So, well, no, it's not just directly at COSA. I mean, with all the many hats that we tend to cross into, it spans the entire continent, I suppose.
And at the end of the day, it's the clients that you want to do DNSSEC. You want the banks, etc., to the e-commerce places to do to do DNSSEC signing and to go and put the DS records into the parents. Yes. Can I sit down now?